mean?
With clothes.
Well, if there's a particular item of clothing you get known for, then
That's right. All right, here you
So-
zoom in on him and give us your best candidate for looking. Look really honest and tell us how you'd be a good guy if you were elected and all that.
Okay, shot.
yeah, looks.
Now tell us what if I'm elected.
If I'm elected
Pot in every
to city
garage.
council, you're going to have someone on city council who believes in individual rights, free markets, and limited government. Right now, we do not have that in Asheville, and very few other places in this country. And I agree with you that I do not have a lot of natural constituents in this town. I understand that, but I'm running to give the citizens of Asheville an alternative. If they do not want to vote for a libertarian on city council or have a libertarian point of view on city council, vote for someone else.
Okay. Well, let me ask you.
Questions. Can you hear me over?
No, you need to step in here if you're really going to do it, or you have to holler. Let me ask you a couple. Let me interview and ask you a couple of questions on important political issues that throughout
Well, I told
history.
you last time I was here, you ask me some tough questions, I might dash out into traffic.
Okay, well, don't dash out into traffic. In the issue of a chicken in every pot, have you a comment on a chicken in every pot? Can you promise a chicken in every pot?
No.
All right,
Raise your own
Do you know
chickens.
how many vegetarians there are in this town?
Can you promise some pot in every house?
No, I will not promise you anything. I will promise you less government and more liberty.
All right,
I have a question.
all right. Well, pan back and
I
come
will
ask
not
it.
promise you any chickens
No chickens and no
or
pot.
any favors to any political groups.
Okay, we'll skip the chickens if we can just have some pot. How's that? All right.
Well,
pot,
I'd
no
like
chicken.
you to go in a little more and explain about what you mean by free market. I mean, does that mean that Staples is a lot like all these corporations are allowed to set up? I mean, they have more power to. I mean, they have more money. They're going to have more money
Hello?
to buy realty downtown. I mean, what does that mean?
Right.
So there's no
Well,
limitation.
Sure, I'll pass it
I
to
would,
her.
I would challenge
There you
the,
go,
the,
pass
the
this to
questioner to tell me what role the government has in limiting.
For
Oh,
you.
yes, hello. We're taking live calls.
No, we're not. This is not a call-in show.
You can't hear him. This is Richard. Okay, hi.
I'm sort of curious now too.
What?
What they're saying there.
I love how you're primping whenever you look over there in the corner, striking a pose.
Strike a pose.
Right.
You know what we need?
Pose.
We need that thing that they used to use on the Daily Show. I think it was where he goes,
It's straight ticket.
you know,
Right.
and it's like it's the Pope and it's Buddha
Right,
and
okay.
it's boop, 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 boop.
Okay.
I've not seen that.
we need
Thanks.
to
Like a
You're right.
like a bass thing that
Right.
goes real fast and all of a sudden
do,
stops.
do, do. Yeah.
It's like
Was that a collar?
That was a caller.
Did he tell you that you were
Awesome.
inadequate, incorrect
He
about
had
what we were?
some. He had some comments on this issue here,
What
which
did he say?
Well, he wanted me to not miss the fact that well, in his opinion, he thinks that they want to go to the partisan elections because that allows voters to vote a straight ticket. So you don't have to think about who you're voting for. You can vote for your party.
Okay.
Well, now
And
how?
half of the total voters in Asheville are Democrats,
But-
and the Democrats are who are raising this resolution.
Makes sense if you're a Democrat, doesn't it?
There's more. I think his point is that it's more likely that a Democrat voter will vote a straight ticket rather than do a cafeteria style and say, well, I like Mumpower or I like Tim Pack or maybe between now and then some other unaffiliated candidate will feel encouraged
Now,
to
what's
participate in the political process.
what's
whereas this will discourage them.
What's wrong with letting the various parties continue on and have their primaries and their elections and do all their thing and have their candidates, and also allowing independents to run without putting such heavy restrictions on them that are basically impossible to achieve?
That's what we have now.
See what I mean? Well,
So
what's
why
wrong with that?
now? Why is this change needed, and why the hurry? Now, let me make one other point, and I'll try and get back to your question here. I was saying Brownie Newman, I think, is pretty secure. He's the one that's introduced this resolution.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing a pretty good job. He's popular with his constituents. Some people might disagree with that, and I'd like to hear about that more. Jan Davis, who's also running for re-election, he's already telegraphed that he may not even run for re-election. It says right here he's definitely in, but I reserve the right to back out. I don't know how you're definitely in, but you might back out. That's not very definite. So now that leaves one person, Brian Freeborn, who was never elected to anything.
Right.
Brian Freeborn is selected, not elected.
Right. How did he get us selected?
Because Terry Bellamy held his council seat, and she ran for mayor. If she lost, she gets to keep the seat. If she wins, the seat's open, and there was nobody running for that seat. So it only becomes open after she won mayor.
Wasn't he the runner-up or something? Like the
Brian Freeborn held or obtained the next highest number of votes.
Okay.
But it was
They're
still
not
the city
obligated to.
It's still members
So they
of
didn't
council
just pull
that
him out of the
appointed
air.
him.
Yes.
He wasn't just pulled out of the air. He
It
did.
wasn't, but the council
But
can't pull anybody out of the
you
air.
can't argue with. We will just take the guy with the next highest number of votes and give him.
They're not
give it
obligated.
to him.
They can choose anybody. They could have chosen Joe Dunn. Even
Well,
though he ran
I'm
for
going to
mayor.
ask it for him to please choose me the next time, and the reason is I need a job. And
It's a part-time job done pay well.
I
It's a
actually
part-time
really do
job.
want to talk about the free market thing, because that's really where I get
go with it.
caught up on libertarian politics. Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have my ideals, and I
They're
probably go with
naive. They
you.
don't know. The
I mean, I have my
libertarians are
ideals,
naive,
but
and they
also
don't.
in reality of the free market economy, I think we do have to have some restrictions. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think when we had a time in this country where there weren't restrictions was when there
Right.
was all those
Robber barons.
robber barons.
Exactly.
Well,
And
you might
you
need to
know,
go back
so-
and check your history on that. Robber baron is a myth.
how is it a myth?
Well, what is a robber baron?
Well, I mean, I'm talking about Carnegie and all
Carnegie
these
was a
super
huge
wealthy.
benefit to this country.
Well, you're talking about what is it called when you give money?
The Rockefellers.
Endow-
Philanthropists.
A philanthropist.
A philanthropist steals from the poor and then gives it back as a charity.
Well,
and
I don't
I'm
think,
sorry,
I
but
don't think philanthropists steal from the poor.
philanthropists
before he
are making
became a
their money off
philanthropist-
of, I mean, they're making their money off
They
of
make
the
their money.
labor of their workers.
That their workers voluntary trade in exchange for compensation.
Voluntary.
The people at the top
I mean, I
will
think it's sort of
always
when you're coming
every
down to actual
We're being double teamed now.
I'm just
No,
saying,
but-
people at the top will every single
just-
time.
I might lose the
every
argument, but I don't like
single
being double
time-
teamed.
I'm listening.
I'm just gonna say, people at the
Go ahead.
top every single time are always going to decide bottom line, always. Period. They're never going to decide for the best interest of the community. It's just
Well,
it's
as
not
long
gonna
as you
happen.
have a free
Yeah.
market, you
That's
have
not true.
the freedom to work for whoever you want to.
But okay,
Or
I want
not.
to get back
Or
to
not.
as
Well,
as
I
someone
choose
on the
not.
city council who,
Good
let's
for you.
say Walmart, has this proposal up to, I don't know. See, I don't really understand how it works. How these people get the land that they get.
They
I
buy
mean,
it.
whatever. I
They
don't.
pay for it.
Right, and so they have the money. Staples has the money to buy that plot of land. Meanwhile, Joe's stationery shop isn't going to buy that plot of land. So it's just, so are you proposing that any business has the right to set up shop downtown without government interference? Because then you're already giving all
Well,
these
you'd have to
businesses
give.
with tons of money.
I think that the burden is on you to tell me why a business in a free society does not have the right to open a business where they would like to.
Well, I think we have to look at what the word free means. I don't think we are living in a free society.
I don't either.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you.
But you're saying
there's too much government interference in the marketplace for us to be a free
But
society.
government interference in what way? Because there's government interference in the way where it's, or even mafia interference in the way unions are not, workers have a very difficult time unionizing in this country and always have. And that is stuff, that the government has interfered in. And okay, I will agree with you then on that. But on the flip side of that, I think that there does need to be some restrictions on trade and on commerce and on markets and whatever, on business, you know. I mean, it's
You may
really
be right.
about
But
capitalism.
you'd have to give me the case. I can't think of a case where that would be true. Where I would agree
What do
with
you
on
mean
that.
you can't think of a case where that would
Well,
be
you're
true?
speaking in
If
generalities.
you're talking about a corporation that
That feels good.
sound really like I just sound,
I have to say there are certain kinds of
Not-
businesses that I don't think necessarily belong downtown that are more appropriate to Tunnel Road or something like that because there's a
chain.
certain ambience, a certain sort of manner we're trying to sell downtown Asheville, and I think businesses like that don't belong there, that would interfere with the image we're trying to present of downtown Asheville, should be told, you know, you're going to go over there, we're not going to let you in over here.
So you would
as an
be
example.
pro-zoning. You would be pro-zoning.
To a basic extent, I think there's a point at which zoning becomes way ridiculous.
I think I don't know if it's even about that, but maybe it's about giving the independent businesses
A fair
a
chance.
fair chance. And the thing about it is that the real estate is so high, and you have all these overpriced restaurants downtown that like
Many
because
of which
they have
never
to
make
pay
it
their
past
rent.
a year.
I mean, and it's
Exactly.
just and
That's
like
the
so
free
you
market.
have all these.
Exactly.
That's the freedom of the market has decided that business does
Right.
not belong in Nashville.
You know what the problem is? I'll tell you something. The corporations and the rich and stuff like that would embrace the Libertarian Party because the Libertarian Party really has a philosophy of wide open and
It
let them do
does.
what they want. The only reason they
Well, you're talking about the Libertarian Party.
right.
And I'm not a-
and
I'm
general
not a
libertarian
spokesman for the
philosophy.
Libertarian
And
Party.
general libertarian philosophy. However, the only reason that they don't embrace the Libertarian Party, because we see that they're not embraced by the rich because you see they don't have any money, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason that doesn't happen is because the corrupt system that we're in now, it even goes beyond just wide open free market. They give the corporations and the very wealthy very
Welfare,
unreasonable
tax breaks.
advantages, tax breaks and stuff like that.
That's interference by the
Really,
government in
that-
the free market.
Right,
And
they're
you
getting-
wouldn't want
they're
like
working
any of
hand
the
in
tax breaks that
hand.
corporations get, any of the grants corporations get from the government. You wouldn't be for that either.
Absolutely not.
The politics,
So,
the government
yeah.
is
Why
not
should I? Why
working
should the
for
government
people.
interfere in the marketplace?
The
But-
government
There's
is
no
not.
justification for that
The
whatsoever.
government
I
is not
understand what
working
you're
for
saying
the
about
people.
that.
The government is working for the corporations and for the rich people.
Right. I want
I-
to change that.
Okay,
Well,
do it.
I mean, I understand what you're saying in terms of it, like, in theory, and I completely agree with you that the government shouldn't be involved in these things. Or, you know, in my ideal, perhaps, like, the whole system of government would be different. It would be self-governing more. But the fact is of what's going on. And so let's say you're on city council and Staples approaches you and you have to like vote on like whether or not allowing Staples to move in downtown. Would you vote yes or no on that?
A city council member is required by law to vote
12 minutes
yes.
still.
Why?
For what?
Because, okay, and this is probably not very well
City
understood.
council member is required to vote yes
You're
for what?
required by law to vote yes if that business
what?
complies with your permit and your regulation
Mm-hmm.
standards. It is against the law for you to vote no.
Okay.
And if you do, General Assembly in Raleigh will come down and vote yes for you.
Okay. So is that free market?
Now, what you're talking
What does that mean?
no, not really. But
I don't hate freedom.
what you're talking about is cases where Staples or Walmart or some of these places, they need a zoning variance in order to put their business and to build their business.
Mm-hmm. And
That
do they have any
is what
problem
the city
getting
council has control over.
that? They do. Do they
Zoning
do they have any problem getting it? Does Staples have any problem getting a zoning variance for that? Generally,
I don't
not.
know. I don't know the
Does
history.
Walmart
Walmart.
gets what Walmart wants?
I don't know. I don't know what happened with the Walmart that we have now on Swanno River Road.
Well, we have it now,
I-
don't we?
We do, but I'll give you another case that I'm more familiar with, and that was the Walmart that was turned down,
Okay.
essentially, on the west side, on
Okay.
Smoky Park Bridge. They wanted to put another Walmart supercenter out there next to Lowe's.
Okay.
they were ready to purchase the property, but they needed 10 acres, which happened to be a trailer park. They needed that extra 10 acres to make the whole plan work. Because you can't put a supercenter on a small piece
Right, they need parking.
footprint. So they asked City Council for a variance for that 10 acres to change that from residential, which is what a trailer park would be zoned as, change it to commercial,
Right.
so that the whole thing would be now commercial now. Then they
Right.
buy it and build their supercenter. Well, they got opposition from local activists, and they were looked like they were not going to get approval for the rezoning of that 10 acres from City Council, so they withdrew their application.
Okay. Now, can I tell you a story that has nothing at all to do with Walmart?
Let's hear it.
Okay. When I was in school, and among other things that I studied in school, I studied to be a record producer. And one of our teachers who was instructing us about recording contracts and about record contracts and negotiating contracts with record labels said you've got to understand that in the music business, a 300-page contract for a record deal is certainly not unheard of. It's not that uncommon. They are monsters, and they are crazy. 30 pages is cut down to nothing. That's like pray that you get a 30-page contract, not a 300-page contract. Okay. When the record company, our teacher told us, when the record company submits their first draft, their attorneys will submit their first draft to you, and you look over the contract. And he says, take a big red marker, he says, and read it all very carefully, and everything that you do not agree with, and maybe you want to sit down with your attorney on this and all. He says, boom, exit out, big red, boom, boom, exit out, exit out, exit out. He says, and then when you've finished and you've gone through this whole contract, he says flip through at random and X out a few dozen more things, so that these are all bargaining chips. And so when they get it back there, you say, well, yeah, well, okay, I'll give on this one, but I want that one, so that you've X'd out as much stuff that you don't care about in order to give them that stuff back to try to keep what you do care about and stuff like that. And I don't know if that could apply to the negotiations and stuff that went down with Walmart. I don't know how serious Walmart's bid was for that place. Was there any earnest money put down on property? Was property actually bought? It's been my impression that Walmart has gotten in the past, or perhaps some people became so unpopular for having let the last big Walmart go in, where there was considerable public disapproval, as you know.
They had 12 hours, I think, of public hearings.
And here's what I've seen, and I've been to public hearings, and you know what I see? I see public hearings, and they say, oh, we're going to have public hearings. What public hearings is? This is the opportunity for the public to come and voice their opinion on the matter. But that's all it's there for. And I see one person after another come forth and say, please do not let so-and-so happen. It's going to pollute the stream that runs through my property, and I'll be out of business because I can't water my cattle anymore. And please don't let this and that happen, because then my poor invalid grandmother won't be able to get to church anymore. And whatever it is. And and then we've got everything, and we just really don't want this in our neighborhood, and and not anybody having one good thing to say about it except the guy that works for the corporation. And then the hearing's over, and then they say,
Thank you for sharing, and
thank
they push it through.
Thank you for sharing, and get the heck out of here.
Some of the arguments presented in public hearing are not valid.
True.
You can say, well, I don't like Walmart. Okay, well, I do. Okay, no.
Okay.
So now what are you going to do about that? That's not a valid. That's not pertinent to the zoning variance.
May I take
That's
that?
the only issue. on
May
the
I
table.
quote that on you're pro Walmart?
I did not say that.
Oh, I thought.
No, I was giving you
Yeah,
an
no, he was giving
hypothetical.
an example.
Plain
I
Jane.
have another question for the
No, I didn't mean
Lines
literally.
are too
I like Walmart. I'm
It's
just
okay.
giving you.
It's okay.
Because I've been trying to understand the libertarian viewpoint.
Right.
Because I
hate
feel like
shopping
it
at
sounds
Walmart.
really good on paper, but when you start talking about things like affirmative action, I mean, where do the libertarians stand on that?
Okay. Oh, we can tell you.
I mean,
Well,
I can assume, I can imagine where they might stand.
Well, let's hear it.
Well, I can only speak for myself. But my political philosophy is libertarian. I'm not trying to speak for any other libertarians or Libertarian Party. My interpretation of the libertarian point of view on that is that racial discrimination is wrong in any form. And that's what affirmative action is.
Well, but what about
discrimination based on skin color, or the fact that you belong to a particular racial group that's getting favors from the government?
So you're saying that who's being discriminated?
Who is being discriminated?
Yeah.
Whoever doesn't get the favors from the government.
I actually,
So-
I have to agree. I don't believe in the idea behind. I mean, I am sympathetic to the spirit behind affirmative action, but I think at this point, I don't think it's fair. I think for in situations like that, financial assistance should be made based on need. Somebody comes from a poor background or something like that, they should get a leg up, but it shouldn't matter color of their skin.
Well, you realize that affirmative action was set into motion in an attempt to try to rectify, to right a
I
lot
know
of
that. I
wrongs
know
that have been done for a long time.
Which is why I'm sympathetic to the idea.
Granted, it's not perfect,
Yeah.
but I personally am glad that some attempt was made.
And I do think that some people, like, were given opportunities and have been given opportunities that they wouldn't have had because of affirmative action. And also, I think affirmative action helps a lot of women. I mean, we're not just talking, it's not just a race thing, it's also a
Right.
gender
It
thing.
benefits mostly white women.
Yeah.
Does it?
does.
Is that
Yeah.
right?
Is that
Mostly
tea
white
cup?
That's
women.
right.
Were you drinking from that?
But
We do.
it just seems like, though, you're assuming that everyone's starting off on equal footing. Like, you're assuming that everyone is starting off,
Ooh, look at that.
like,
It'd be too
on
late by the
equal
time you look.
footing, and I just don't think that that's the reality, and I
Good
don't
one,
think it's
huh?
ever
It's
going
not.
to be
No,
reality.
that, that's that is reality, and I think that people
There's Henry Rollins.
that law
I've
should
seen that.
respect reality. that we do not have the same footing,
That's a
but
short
we
hair
have
these days.
should have the same opportunity
short
to
hair
excel
these
based
days.
on our
Oh,
merit.
yeah, way short. He used to have
On a
long
case
hair.
by case basis, if
got
you
the
can
Superman.
prove that you were
He and I
discriminated
used to
against,
have very,
particular
our hair
case,
was all
you
very,
may
very
have
similar.
cause for getting a
Yeah, we both just had
special
long hair and never combed it.
Yeah.
Kind of
You
wavy.
know, if you can say, well, I was discriminated against, I should, and I can prove this to you with facts and argument, that I would have been in a much different place had I not been discriminated against. You may have cause in a court of law,
Let me try this.
but that's based on your direct violation of that individual's rights, not the rights of a group. Affirmative action recognizes groups, not individuals,
Don't like it?
and that's why I'm opposed to it.
I wasn't big on it.
A group cannot be discriminated against. Only individuals can suffer discrimination.
This got real
But how
short.
about all the individuals in a group?
Right.
If you can
I mean, that's
prove
the
that
thing.
100% of a particular group is discriminated against, and I mean, you can make
Well,
your
I mean,
case. I will
everyone
listen
is
to it.
discriminated against on some level. I mean, it's
Yes.
just like a.
So why should the government be favoring certain groups?
3 minutes. 3
It
minutes.
creates. Well, first of all, it's unfair, and I think it's immoral. And also, it's not practical. It creates.
So what is
My
your
idea
It
idea?
creates more. It exacerbates the problem that it was created
If the
to solve.
government is supposed to stay out of everything.
I did, no, I did. I
Okay,
did
because
not
I'm
say that.
trying to understand what your idea, like how you envision. the
There is a
government.
proper
What
role
is
for
the
government.
role?
That is the protection of individual rights.
How? I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well,
I mean,
if you
do you mean,
deprive me
like-
of my ability to speak and express my political views, and I'm not on your private property, then you're abridging my right to freedom of speech. And if you continue to do that, I have a case to make against you. And the government
So you're
should back
going to
me
take
up.
it to the government.
The government should
See,
protect
I'm
me
of
in
the
that sense. They should
belief.
protect
I'm
the
like,
freedom
I
of
get
speech.
the ideal that we're always looking to the government to step in there and like help us out with their problem. And I think that actually, in my perfect world, we'd be able to settle the dispute without the government. I mean, we
Absolutely.
are the government.
Exactly.
We should be able
Exactly.
to.
You've been watching the
Absolutely.
Mad Scientist Tea Party. This is your access. If you're particularly if you're a member of URTV, come on down, have a cup of tea, discuss whatever's on your mind. This is the open door. We have 1 minute to tell you the important, scientifically proven facts
Wrap it up.
that things are a lot more like they are now than they ever have been.
before.
And that if there is something moving on the tube and noise coming out of the box, people will sit and watch it. Scientifically proven fact.
And don't forget, watch Mount Dungeon, Art Scene Asheville, and all the other fine programming on your TV.
What are we
Oh,
going
and one more.
quickly, what is the solution to your problem?
Solution to my problem.
Should there be a
Yes.
telephone campaign to some
The solution
particular
to this
person?
problem is the city of Asheville can change its charter to make the elections
certainly
partisan.
can.
And they can also change their charter to not require that unaffiliated voters have to get a petition signed.
Right. But
They
what's
can strike
going to
that.
make them do that? What are you
Public
suggesting?
outcry. You're talking about public hearings. This is an opportunity for the public to make their
so
case.
you want people to go to a public.
Hello and welcome to the Asheville Global Report. I'm Annabelle Peavy.
And I'm Eamon Martin.
The Asheville Global Report can now be seen throughout the week on cable access channels in Asheville, Chapel Hill, and Raleigh, as well as Free Speech TV on the Dish Network.
This week we'll hear reports of the police brutality which occurred in Los Angeles, California during a May 1st immigrant rights demonstration.
And later on in our program, we'll be reporting on recent environmental news, ranging from U.S. oil giant Occidental Petroleum being found responsible for destruction in the Amazon, to federal requests for longer prison sentences for eco-crimes.
In our top story this week, the city of Los Angeles is facing criticism after its police department deployed batons and more than 200 rounds of rubber bullets to clear out a park where immigration rights activists were holding a rally on May 1st. In the aftermath, 2 officers were demoted and the mayor promised an investigation. The FBI said it will also open a preliminary inquiry to determine whether the civil rights of protesters were violated. Officers say they came under attack with plastic bottles and other objects from a group of agitators and then decided to clear the park. Officers dressed in riot gear then moved in, pushing people, hitting some with batons, and firing 240 rubber bullets. Reporters and others later said they had no warning. Criticism of the police action at MacArthur Park is growing, along with potential legal and political consequences arising from scenes of rally-goers and journalists being struck by officers. State Assembly Speaker Fabian Nunez said, quote, "To say we are outraged is an understatement. We want those responsible in the highest levels of the LAPD to pay consequences." Victor Naro, an attorney with the National Lawyers Guild, noted that in one videotape, he saw police fire a rubber round at a boy who appeared to be 10 and toss him aside like a piece of meat.
Demands are escalating in Iraq's National Assembly for a scheduled U.S. troop withdrawal from Iraq. Some 133 Iraqi lawmakers from different political blocs, calling themselves the Free Deputies, signed a document demanding a scheduled withdrawal of the U.S.-led multinational troops from their country. A legislator from the Sadris bloc, Saleh al-Olakali, told reporters that his group initiated the document ahead of a UN Security Council review on Iraq slated for next month. The Sadris bloc, whose cabinet members had resigned, represents members of a group led by Shiite leader Muqtada al-Sadr, who has been calling for setting a timetable to end the U.S.-British occupation of Iraq. Okali said the memo signed by the lawmakers in the 275-seat parliament would be handed over to the UN Security Council and its Secretary General, the Organization of Islamic Conference, and the Iraqi government.
President Bush and congressional leaders have begun negotiating a second war funding bill, with Democrats agreeing to drop their demand for a timeline to bring troops home from Iraq. Democrats backed off after the House failed on a vote of 222 to 203 to override the president's veto of a $124 billion measure that would have required some U.S. forces to begin withdrawing as early as July. Bush did not cite the sectarian civil war or the insurgency against the U.S. occupation, which is widely understood to be the main source of violence in Iraq. Instead, Bush said the troops must remain because of al-Qaeda. Bush said, quote, "The decision we face in Iraq is not whether we ought to take sides in a civil war. It's whether we stay in the fight against the same international terrorist network that attacked us on 9/11.
A Pentagon panel said recently that the military is putting already strained troops at greater risk of mental health problems because of repeated deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Issuing an urgent warning, the Defense Department's Task Force on Mental Health said more than 1/3 of troops and veterans currently suffer from problems such as traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. With an escalating Iraq war, those numbers are expected to worsen, and current staffing and money for military health care won't be able to meet the need. Branding Pentagon policies overly conservative and out of date, the task force called for more money and a fundamental shift in treatment to focus on prevention and screening, rather than simply relying on soldiers to come forward on their own. The task force found 38% of soldiers and 31% of Marines reporting psychological concerns.
Major General Rick Lynch, commander of the Army's 3rd Infantry Division in Iraq, has warned that American casualties will increase as a security plan aimed at quelling violence continues, a prediction that followed the deadliest month so far this year for U.S. forces. Lynch said numbers will go up over the next 3 months as the final U.S. troops arrive to enforce the plan. The commander said, quote, "There are going to be increased casualties during this surge because we are taking the fight to the enemy."
Iraq is hemorrhaging doctors as violence racks the nation. To stem the flow, the Iraqi government has decreed that medical schools are forbidden to issue diplomas and transcripts to new graduates. To some students and doctors, the diploma decision, like Iraq's crumbling medical system, provides clear proof of the government's helplessness and the nation's decline. Akif al-Alusi, a leader of the Iraqi Medical Association, said they would challenge the rule, which he called a violation of basic rights. Iraq's once top-notch medical system has been devastated by economic sanctions in the 1990s and present-day warfare. Hospitals often run out of essentials such as gauze, antibiotics, and even blood. Much of their equipment is outdated or broken. Worst of all, they are running out of doctors, who, like many of Iraq's intellectuals, have been the frequent targets of kidnappings and assassinations. The Iraqi Medical Association estimates that at least 1/3 of the country's 40,000 or so doctors have fled to Jordan, Syria, and other countries.
Last month, armor-piercing weapons known as explosively formed projectiles hit a record high in Iraq. Lieutenant General Raymond T. Odierno, who oversees day-to-day U.S. military operations there, said the number of attacks with the projectiles rose to 65 in April. The growing use of the projectiles is a major concern for U.S. commanders because the weapons are powerful enough to punch through the heaviest U.S. armored vehicles, including the Abrams tank. The weapons are far more lethal than other roadside bombs. Overall attacks using roadside bombs doubled in Iraq from 2006 to 2007 and number about 1,200 a month. According to military statistics, they cause roughly 70% of the casualties suffered by U.S. troops.
According to a survey published by the Pentagon, 1 in 10 U.S. soldiers in Iraq mistreat civilians or damages their property. The report said the mental health of soldiers and Marines deteriorated significantly as a result of extended or multiple deployments. The report said, quote, "Approximately 10% of soldiers and Marines report mistreating non-combatants." The report also found that fewer than half of all soldiers and Marines would report a team member for unethical behavior, and more than 1/3 believe torture should be allowed to save the life of a fellow soldier or Marine.
The number of terrorism incidents in Iraq and resulting deaths, injuries, and kidnappings skyrocketed from 2005 to 2006, according to newly released statistics by U.S. counterterrorism officials. Of the 14,338 reported terrorist attacks worldwide last year, 45% took place in Iraq, and 65% of the global fatalities stemming from terrorism occurred in Iraq. In 2005, Iraq accounted for just 30% of the worldwide terrorist attacks. The figures, compiled by the National Counterterrorism Center and released with the annual State Department Country Reports on Terrorism, show that the number of incidents in Iraq rose 91% from 2005 to 2006. Almost all of those incidents involved the death, injury, or kidnapping of at least one person. All told, the number of people killed, injured, or kidnapped as a result of terrorism in Iraq jumped 87% from some 20,000 to nearly 39,000. The number of terrorism incidents in Afghanistan rose 52% in 2006 compared with 2005, and the number of people killed, injured, or kidnapped nearly doubled.
Former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser said recently that Australia's government and close ally, the United States, behaved in a tyrannical way and for evil purpose by jailing militants at Guantanamo Bay. Fraser, a conservative and mentor to current Prime Minister John Howard, said Australia seemed to have lost its democratic path under the man who served as its treasurer and deputy before becoming leader in 1996. Fraser said Howard should never have agreed to a citizen and accused Taliban fighter, David Hicks, being locked up for 5 years at Guantanamo awaiting trial. He said, quote, "We used to believe that those in positions of political authority would respect and work to protect the rights of all Australian citizens. We now know that to be naive and incorrect." Fraser said Australia's agreement with Guantanamo military tribunals was a disgrace. He said, quote, "The main story is a willingness of two allegedly democratic governments prepared to throw every legal principle out the window and establish a process that we would expect of tyrannical regimes."
U.S. troops in Iraq are reacting angrily to Pentagon restrictions aimed at curbing internet postings from war zones. The Pentagon said blogs had to be cleared first with officers and that soldiers would be punished if they publicly revealed troop movements, planned raids, travel itineraries, photographs of casualties, new technology, or material that could be compromising their locations. Reacting to the ban, soldiers said the real reason for the curbs were their negative comments about the war, including skepticism about President Bush's claims about progress. One soldier's recent post, complaining about the new rules, said, quote, "It's not like we aren't already getting our asses kicked in the information war. Now let's take the one authentic voice, the one group best able to tell the real story, and let's shut them down. Fools." The guidelines require soldiers and civilians working for the military to obtain approval from an officer for every blog entry and some emails.
Senior Bush administration officials have told Congress that they could not pledge that the administration would continue to seek warrants from a secret court for a domestic wiretapping program, as it agreed to do in January. Rather, they argue that the president had the constitutional authority to decide for himself whether to conduct surveillance without warrants. As a result of the January agreement, the administration said that the National Security Agency's domestic spying program has been brought under the legal structure laid out in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which requires court-approved warrants for the wiretapping of American citizens and others inside the U.S. But on May 1st, the senior officials said they believe that the president still had the authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to once again order the NSA to conduct surveillance inside the country without warrants. The administration had earlier argued that both the president's inherent executive powers under Article 2, as well as the September 2001 congressional authorization to use military force against al-Qaeda, provided him with the power to conduct surveillance without warrants.
According to a new report published by Israeli human rights groups, Palestinians detained by Israeli security forces are routinely tortured and ill-treated. The report says the ill treatment, which includes beatings, sensory deprivation, and other forms of physical abuse, contravenes international law and Israeli law. The report found that almost 50% of detainees who were arrested in raids or at random were beaten by the army or police before they were handed over to the Shin Bet security agency for interrogation. The prisoners were interrogated for an average of 35 days and spent most of their time in tiny cells in solitary confinement. They were interrogated from 5 to 10 hours a day. More than half did not see a lawyer or representative of the Red Cross for the whole period of interrogation. The report found that prisoners were effectively starved by being offered food designed to appear rotten or unappetizing. Their only exercise was the walk from the cell to the interrogation room, during which they were shackled, handcuffed, and blindfolded. 1 in 5 detainees were deprived of sleep for up to 3 days, and a quarter were beaten by their interrogators. The report said Israel's legal authorities received more than 500 complaints of Shin Bet ill treatment since 2001, but did not carry out a single criminal investigation.
Almost 1,600 families in Afghanistan have been displaced, and many others need urgent humanitarian assistance after U.S. warplanes bombed several villages. Several Afghan and UN officials say up to 60 civilians were also killed and hundreds of homes destroyed near Herat in the Shindan district. The dead were reported to include many children, some of whom were infants. 2 days later, another U.S. bombing raid left up to 13 civilians dead. Villagers and government officials insisted the airstrikes did not hit any insurgents and in fact killed entire families. Thousands of civilians have been killed since U.S.-led troops invaded Afghanistan in 2001 to remove the Taliban government. Afghan officials are warning that the goodwill of the Afghan people toward the government and the foreign military presence is wearing thin.
A recent State Department report has described the government of Sudan as a strong partner in the war on terror. The distinction is controversial because hundreds of thousands of people in Sudan's Darfur region have been murdered by militias widely believed to be backed by the Sudanese government. The characterization of Sudan as a helpful ally is found in the State Department's annual country reports on terrorism, which is based on information provided by U.S. intelligence agencies. The report, required by Congress, is designed to give U.S. policymakers, the public, and foreign governments a detailed snapshot of global terrorist incidents and trends. The report has listed Sudan as a state sponsor of terrorism every year since at least 1993. Raphael Pearl, an analyst at the Congressional Research Service, the nonpartisan research arm of Congress, said, quote, "They are a damn good partner in the war on terror. They have cooperated on many, many issues." Pearl applauded the State Department for listing Sudan as being helpful on counterterrorism matters, even if it remains on the list of state sponsors. He also said the issue of whether Sudan should remain on the blacklist is a political hot potato that is separate from Darfur. Pearl said, quote, "Darfur is not terrorism."
A former warlord who for a time had been on the CIA payroll was sworn in last week as mayor of Mogadishu and announced a plan to pacify Sudan's capital within 3 months by requiring residents to turn in their guns. Mohammed Dahir told a crowd at his inauguration, "Weapons will be in the hands of the government and no one else." Dahir's appointment as mayor follows the installation of another former warlord, Abdi Hassan Kabir Awale, as the national police chief. According to U.S. officials, both were briefly on the CIA payroll in 2006 under a covert program to fight the rise of Islamic fundamentalists, a plan that fell apart when the Union of Islamic Courts drove the warlords from power last June.
A feared paramilitary boss has been charged with ordering the murders of 2 union leaders at a coal mine owned by Drummond Co., Inc., an Alabama company being sued in a U.S. court for alleged complicity in the killings. Rodrigo Tovar Pupa